Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews. My name is Alyssa, and this is my review for Star Trek the Motion Picture. So, the first Star Trek film. And so, this is the first video in a series of videos that I will do monthly, in which I will review each of the 6 original series films. So, Star Trek the Motion Picture up through Star Trek 6 The Undiscovered Country, and I will do it 1 month at a time, starting here in January 2022 with the first Star Trek film. This seed was planted for doing these reviews by one of my subscribers who asked me a couple months ago if I was ever going to do the Star Trek films, and I said, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll get to it one day or something, but I started thinking about it, and I was like, I really should do that. And I wish I could give credit to who that subscriber was, but I just poured through all of my old comments, and I don't remember what video it was on or anything, and I can't find it. I want to say that it was the person with the username Life in the Void. I may or may not be correct about that. Maybe Life in the Void, if you want to respond in the comments, was that you who said that? Or maybe it was someone else. But regardless of who it was, they planted that seed of an idea in my head, and I decided that I'm going to go ahead and do it once a month, starting with the original film, Star Trek the Motion Picture. And what I'm going to do here is just kind of go through the beats of the film, just the main beats, and just kind of give my thoughts on it. I'm just going to go through the film in order. What I am not going to do is delve deeply into some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, some of the production stuff, like getting into the Star Trek Phase 2 show and all of those things and all of that. You can find that information, readily all over the internet. And my brother on his channel, Enchantment of Eternity, did a review for this film. I don't remember how long ago it was. It was a few years ago, but it's still on his channel if you want to look for it in Enchantment of Eternity, where he really does a deep dive into all of that stuff. And it's interesting stuff because it does explain why the movie ended up being the way that it did. But I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to talk more about the actual film viewing experience. Mainly my experience of rewatching it recently. But I also will talk a little bit about what it was like when I first saw it as a 5-year-old. So in some ways, these Star Trek movie reviews will be very similar to my Nostalgia Lane series, in which I pick a film every month and rewatch it and compare my current view on it to what I thought of it as in my childhood. But this will be a little different because in not every case do I love the film, or did I ever love the film. Like in this case, I never really did. Whereas in my Nostalgia Lane series, I will always pick a film that I used to love. And also, the format of the videos will be different. I'm going to go through each plot point just straight through, and I'm not using the Nostalgia Lane format. So it's similar, but different kind of videos focusing on the Star Trek films. So let me go ahead and get started with my review on the motion picture. And I do want to touch on, to start, my memories of seeing it when I was a 5-year-old. Okay, so I saw this in 1979. I was 5, and I remember very vividly seeing it in a drive-in theater. My parents used to take my siblings and I to the drive-ins and their big giant 1970s station wagons where they put the seat down and there was like this cavernous back of a station wagon, or at least it felt that way when we were little kids. And we'd just bring all these blankets and pillows and we'd wear our pajamas and it would be super fun. And we did this for Star Trek the Motion Picture. For those of you who know my brother Mark from Enchantment of Eternity, he was a baby. He would have been an infant. So I can't imagine that my parents would have brought an infant for this. Like, I feel like he probably was at home with a babysitter, it seems like. But I definitely, at least myself and my other brother, who would have been 3 years old at the time, would have been there. And there are certain scenes that I like really vividly remember seeing and just like being confused by and not understanding what was happening. And I was already familiar with the characters at this point. I saw my first original series episode when I was about 3 or 4, so I'd already watched some of the episodes, so I knew who these characters were. Just didn't always necessarily understand what was happening. I remember asking my mom about things. So I'll go ahead and get into it scene by scene, and as I go along, I may bring up, oh yeah, I totally remember that when as a 5-year-old from the back of the station wagon watching this and not understanding what was happening. Starting with the opening scene, because I do remember that opening scene. But actually, before I talk about the opening scene, I did actually want to touch on the credits, the opening credit sequence, which watching it now, it's really weird because I'm listening to a song that in my mind is very much the Next Generation theme song. But at the time, obviously, this is 7 years before the Next Generation, this was the song that was composed for this particular film. Maybe it would have also been used in Star Trek Phase 2, I'm not sure. But it was definitely used in this film, but now my brain hears it as the Next Generation theme song, and it's really weird not seeing the Enterprise D go. It's just this boring, plain black screen. There's no space or anything. There's no stars. It's just a plain, boring black screen with everybody's, the actors' names and everything, and it's very boring. But it was very strange to watch. Now let me get into that opening scene, because I do remember asking my mom about this. I was like, who are those people? What are they? And she, I guess, knew that these were the Klingons, even though in retrospect, I do know now that this was the first time that we ever saw the Klingons in the form that we know them now, the way that they would appear in future Trek films and then in the Next Generation, because in the original series, of course, they just look like humans with brown makeup. I mean, white people with brown makeup mostly. I think it was. I feel like it was getting a little hairy back then to distinguish the Klingons from just people of color. But I don't know. That's what they did. But this is what apparently how they always wanted the Klingons to look. So we also get the debut of the Klingon theme music that would be used throughout the 6 original films. So, big dramatic opening scene, the Klingons with that dramatic theme music, and then the boom. They would do that all throughout this movie. Boom. And it's really dramatic, really exciting. And then what do the Klingons do? Die immediately. So feel bad for all those actors who had to sit through hours of putting all that makeup on just to die immediately. So the Klingons are just a framing device to set up the danger of this, cloud. We later know to be called V'ger. They could have really used anyone, but I guess they just wanted to say, hey, look, Klingons look different now. Isn't that cool? So I guess that's probably why they used the Klingons. It really could have just been anyone in that position. Now, let me get into the appearance of Admiral Kirk, because this is where I feel like he looks the most like he did in the original series. Like, his hair is different, but otherwise it's only 11 years later since the last episode of 10 years actually, 10 years later, because 69 to 79. So when this film was being released, and it would have been filmed even earlier than that, so it's less than 10 years apart. So he's still fairly young, and also he hasn't put on the pounds yet and he hasn't started losing his hair so I think of like movie William Shatner is looking a lot different, and he also has a deeper voice in the movies. But this version of him is, I think, closer to the version that I would think of from the original series. But Admiral Kirk in this film is basically the asshole Commodore. Do you remember that trope? I have complained about this before. There's this old trope from the original series where there would always be an asshole Commodore, or maybe occasionally Admiral. I think they tended to be Commodores. Or a couple of cases, it was an ambassador who would come on and tell everybody what to do and try to take command of the ship and just basically put everybody's lives in danger because they didn't know what the hell they were doing. In this film, Kirk is that. He is the asshole admiral of the asshole Commodore who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, who takes over the ship for no reason. The only difference here is he's a main character, so all the other characters are happy about him being the asshole admiral. You see, like, Sulu in the beginning with this, like, shit-eating grin on his face. He's so happy that this asshole admiral is coming and kicking out the perfectly legitimate captain who should be captain, who knows what the hell he's doing, who understands the new refit Enterprise. And Kirk has absolutely no good reason for doing it. And I don't even really know how Starfleet went along with him. Like, how did he convince them? Because he has no good reason at all. He gives some weak sauce excuses as to why he's taking over. Like, the first thing he says is that, oh, my experience, 5 years being out there. Yeah, I'm sure Decker has been out there too. Maybe not as captain. They haven't specified how long he's been captain. But he wouldn't rise to the rank of captain without having been out there for 5 years. So that's a dumb excuse. And then he says, my familiarity with the ship. And then Decker says, actually, the ship's been completely refit. You're not 1/10 familiar, as familiar with it as I am. And then Kirk does a little sleight of hand and goes, oh, that's why I need you with me. But you just said the reason why you're captain is because you have familiarity with the ship. And he just proved that is not true. And you're still taking over anyway. He is the asshole captain from the old original, or asshole admiral or Commodore from the old original series episodes. And it's proven. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Like, he almost gets them killed a couple of times. And then Decker eventually, is totally happy with it by the end of the movie. So it's just dumb. Like, they either should have just not have promoted him and just let him stay captain, or come up with a much better reason for him to take over than, I've got the 5 years experience. Like, that is not a reason at all. And this kind of bugs me all throughout this movie. Okay, then we get a scene with Kirk and Scotty where they take a good solid 5 minutes to get to the Enterprise aboard a shuttle so that they can fly around it going dun, da, 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 and they can show the Enterprise from all angles, and they can go, ooh. One of my favorite scenes of all time from Lower Decks is when they mocked this in the penultimate episode of the first season of Lower Decks, which was a parody of all of the films. And they had this scene of them flying around in the shuttlecraft, looking at the Cerritos, going, ooh. So watching this scene again makes me think of that. So I kind of laughed at it. And I'll talk about this throughout the film. There's a lot of just unnecessary long drawn out sequences like that. This film really could have been an hour long if they had taken out all of those types of things. And the whole excuse for them even being able to do that is that the transporter doesn't work. And then later on they have a really kind of horrifying scene where a couple people get killed in the transporter, and then you hear them screaming, "Oh!" And it's kind of dark, and it's, I guess, an excuse just to kill off that Vulcan science officer so that they could have room for Spock to come in later. But it's kind of unnecessarily horrifying. And then all of a sudden the transporter is just magically fixed, and then McCoy comes over on the transporter and complaining about not wanting to have his molecules scrambled. And I don't blame him. Like, somebody just died horribly. They even said in Starfleet, like, oh, what we got back didn't live long. So whatever they got back was like some disgusting disfigured thing or something. And then, 5 minutes later, they're like, oh, the transporter's fine. McCoy can go over there now. I wouldn't want to go over there if I was McCoy either. What the hell? So it just speaks to the clunkiness of this film overall. That transporter is fixed now. It's fine. So McCoy, we don't need McCoy to fly around for 5 minutes and look at the Enterprise. All right, so then we get to the part when they are leaving Earth to go off on to their mission to stop this mysterious cloud that is causing destruction and heading directly toward Earth. And this is where I'm reminded that there was very little Star Trek canon established yet at this point. So this is actually the first piece of Star Trek canon since Turnabout Intruder 10 years earlier. Yes, I know there was the animated series in between, but at the time, it wasn't considered canon. That was just added to canon later, like much, much later, so that, Paramount Plus or CBS All Access could have all of that stuff. And they just declared, oh, it's canon now. But at the time, it wasn't considered canon. So the last piece of canon was actually Turnabout Intruder, the final episode of the original series. So I forget how little canon has been established. There's no Next Generation yet, no Deep Space Nine, Voyager, any of that stuff. So this thing where they can't do warp drive in the solar system, that's not really a thing anymore. I don't know that that's been mentioned anymore since then. We don't go to Earth a whole lot. But I'm thinking of the Defiant went there in Deep Space Nine once, and I don't remember them saying anything about that. And the Next Generation, they went there to stop the Borg, and I don't remember that. I don't think that's really a thing. And then they're just like going, they're going through warp, and then all of a sudden, oh, wormhole! Oh, we're in a wormhole now. And that's just random, and I'm like, what? So they're going to be in the Gamma Quadrant now, or the Delta Quadrant? But I don't think the wormhole means what we think it means. Like, it is not the same thing as what we think of as a wormhole in Trek canon nowadays. It's just this weird thing that seems to have been created by doing warp drive in the solar system. I think I was a little confused by it, and I've always been confused by this my whole life. And then they're all like, everything's all weird. And I do specifically remember this scene when I was a little kid and asking my mom about what the hell was going on. And she was like, oh, they're in a wormhole. I was like, what does that mean? And to be fair to my 5-year-old self, I still don't really understand it here as 47 years old. Don't really understand it because they changed canon completely after this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the original series that's like that. But I forget, this is still basically the original series. So I remember being like really weirded out by this, and I had completely forgotten this, but as a kid, I used to go around going, "Photon torpedoes." It was just Decker's line when they're in that wormhole. Below that Fraser order. It is so ridiculous now. I'm just like, what the hell is going on here? It's just, and it was random. It's just like all of a sudden, oh, wormhole. All right. It's so weird, so bizarre. Anyways, then we move on to Spock now comes aboard. I kind of skipped over his scene from earlier in the movie, so I'll go ahead and touch on that now. There was a scene earlier in the film where Spock is hippied out with his long hair, and he's, I guess, presumably had gone through some intense, meditation training and, training to be logical, and he's going through a like a ceremony called I forget calendar or calendar. I forget what it's called. Um, to the best of my memory, this is the only time that that was ever mentioned. But please correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it was mentioned by DePaul in an Enterprise episode or something. I haven't done my Enterprise rewatch yet, so I don't recall this ever being mentioned. Certainly, I don't remember being mentioned in the original series, which I did do a rewatch of just a couple years ago. So I feel like they just made it up for this movie, and I don't know that it was ever mentioned again, but I could be wrong. Please correct me in the comments. But anyway, trying to achieve perfect, logicalness or whatever, and he's unable to do it because he still has this attachment to going back into space, and when he gets to the Enterprise, he tells Kirk that he had this kind of a special connection to this cloud, like something was calling to him, like he had some kind of telepathic connection to it. Actually, kind of reminded me of what they did many, many years later in Star Trek Discovery with Ethan Peck's Spock having the connection to the Red Angel. But so that's what it reminded me of. Then it's just kind of not really ever mentioned again. It's just a plot point that's completely dropped. There's a scene which I'll talk about in just a minute where Spock goes through in his spacesuit, but I still I didn't see the connection there. I didn't see that it was calling to him. And why would an old Earth space probe that turned into an artificial intelligence, why would that be calling to Spock, or why would he have a telepathic connection with that entity? Makes no sense to me. So I don't know why they even said that. There's just some reason to get Spock on the Enterprise. Oh, and by the way, there's another, I would say good solid 3 minutes, not quite as long. I timed the Kirk and Scotty thing. It was 5 minutes. At this one I didn't time it. I would say good solid 2 to 3 minutes of Spock's ship docking on the Enterprise, going da 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 da. Why do they keep doing this? This movie really could have been an hour-long episode. So that's another example of them kind of really dragging it out. Now, speaking of dragging it out, now let me talk about when they finally go into this cloud thingy. But actually, before I get into how boring it was when they went into the cloud, backtrack a second to when that decision is made. Kirk wants to go in there to try to figure out what's happening and try to stop the cloud from reaching Earth. And Decker protests. Decker says that that decision is unwarranted. Now, put a pin in that. I'll get back to that in just a minute. Now, they go into the cloud and... I literally did fall asleep while I was watching it. Probably both as a kid and as my adult self when I watched it recently. I must have fallen asleep when I was a kid because we had all the blankets and pillows in the back of the big station wagon, and this is a boring ass fuck, so I'm sure I slept through it. And now watching it now, I was kind of drifting in and out of sleep. And I kept waking up and nothing had changed. They're still going through the cloud very slowly, and every once in a while Kirk would say something or whatever. And I woke up right at the part when Lieutenant Alyssa was getting struck by lightning, and I did not think that I needed to bother and rewind it to see what I missed, because I think I missed a whole lot of nothing. So yeah, then Lieutenant Alyssa gets, struck by lightning or whatever and killed by the cloud entity thing, the Beecher thing. And then Decker says, "This is how I define unwarranted." And you know what? I'm on Team Kirk here. Even though I do think Kirk was an asshole for taking over in the first place, I think Kirk was right. First of all, when Decker was like, "Oh, this is how I define unwarranted." Well, you didn't have an answer when he asked that question originally, because you didn't know that was going to happen. That's bullshit. He didn't know something like that was going to happen. What did he want Kirk to do? To just sit there and just let the thing go to Earth? They had to go in the cloud. That was the only decision. Yes, it's going to be a little risky, but what kind of captain are you if you're not willing to take risks? You have to take risks. the whole friggin' Earth is at stake. You've got to take a risk and go in there. So I'm 100% Team Kirk on this one, and I thought that was like bullshit that he said that. Oh, this is hard to find unwarranted. No, fuck you. But overall, I still think Kirk was the asshole taking over the Enterprise. But Kirk is right in this instance. See, I'm fair. I'm fair to both of them. So then Lieutenant Alyssa comes back as like a probe of V'ger, as she now calls it. And I specifically remember having the action figures. I had the Decker action figure, the Kirk action figure, the Spock action figure. And I specifically remember the action figure for Lieutenant Alyssa with the little like thing on her. She's got this little dot on her chest now that she's a probe. And I had no understanding of that at all. When I was a kid, like, I didn't know what happened to her. Like, I was like, why has she got that dot on her now? Why is she being all weird? It's going, V'ger. It's V'ger. V'ger wants to know. V'ger. It was, I didn't get it as a kid. Here, yeah, I get it. But, yeah, it's still very slow moving movie. Speaking of slow moving, then we get Spock going out into space with the suit on, so he could go and try to mind meld with V'ger. And first of all, he does a Vulcan nerve pinch on his fellow crew member so that he could sneak out there and put the spacesuit on. Nothing happens to him for that. It's never mentioned. No one ever says, hey, so you fucking nerve pinched one of your crew members. That's like insubordination. Like, he should be in trouble for that. But it's never, ever mentioned that he did that. So he goes out. And this scene is like, like Spock slowly going out into space. And then he reaches what he thinks is V'ger, or the center of the cloud, or whatever he thinks it is, and attempts to do a mind meld and goes, ah, and goes, hurtling back. And that too was like very slow. This movie is just so slow. But then later on, in sickbay, he like has a little bit of information about, V'ger, and that it's an artificial life form, and they're from a machine planet, and he got a glimpse of the machine planet, and blah, blah, blah. And now we can set up for the dramatic conclusion of this movie. And now, the dramatic conclusion, the exciting climax. So exciting as V'ger slowly crawls toward Earth very slowly and sends out these probes that float over the planet and apparently will do something destructive in an hour, two. We don't know. At one point, Chekhov says 57 minutes, but that just seems arbitrary. They don't have a countdown at any point. It's like, oh, the Earth is in danger. We better do something about it. No, seriously, for having the stakes as high as the whole Earth is going to be destroyed, like, there is no tension in this ending at all. I mean, the stakes are high. The tension is non-existent. There is no tension. There should be a lot of tension, but there is not at all. It's just really like, oh, let's go do something about this. So then you get the reveal at the end, and I will say that it is interesting that it was the Voyager probe that was sent out by Earth a long time ago, and it was assimilated by, not the Borg, but by these other machine people that aren't the Borg. Then it became a kind of a life form that wanted to continue Voyager's original mission, which was to gather as much information as it could and return it to its creator. This is very similar to the plot of the Changeling episode from the original series, but I think it's different enough that it would be worth being another episode of a Star Trek show. They could have made this as an episode of Star Trek Phase 2, which I think they were going to actually do that. And I read that they were going to actually make this a 2-hour pilot episode. And no, it should have been like a 1-hour episode because they just add in all of that extra stuff that just drags on. But anyway, then we get everything wrapped up with Decker deciding to merge with V'ger so that he can save the day or whatever. Sure, that may as well happen. I don't know. I didn't really understand why he was so into doing this. He was just like, Jim, I want this. Just like you wanted the Enterprise, I want this. But why? Like, I don't see where the dots have been connected here that he suddenly, like, wants this as badly as Kirk wanted the Enterprise. That makes no sense to me. What, just because the probe looks like the chick that he used to be in love with, so he wants to merge with... He realizes he's not going to, like, have sex with that Ileela probe, right? He knows that, right? Because I don't understand what it is he wants so badly. Like, I don't see where the dots were connected that he suddenly wants this. It makes no sense, but sure. Let's wrap up this boring ass movie. Let's have a conclusion of some sort. Sure, let's just do that. And then this film is mercifully over, and I can move on next month to watch Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So, let me wrap up this video by giving my rating out of 10. I will do this every month for every Star Trek film. I will be basing my rating off of my recent rewatch, because I don't necessarily remember what my rating would have been a long time ago. So, the lowest rating possible would be a 1. The highest rating possible would be a 10. So, in a scale between 1 and 10, my rating for Star Trek, the original motion picture, is a 5. So right down the middle, but a 5 is a pretty low score for a Star Trek episode or film for me. If you've watched my reviews of Lower Decks and of Discovery this past year, I think I may have given out a 6 once. 7 tends to be when I'm like, the episode is like, it wasn't my favorite. I tend to give 7s. So 5 is pretty low. But it's not so bad that it warrants like a 3 or 2 or 1 or anything like that. Which some of those episodes on my least favorite Star Trek Voyager video, which I just put out there recently, some of those episodes would probably be a 1. But this movie is fine. You know, it was an interesting story. It just should have been cut in half. It should have been an hour long and not drawn out as much as it was. So whatever. It's a 5 out of 10. And that does it for my review for Star Trek The Motion Picture. Please join me next month as I do review Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan. Thank God for that film. That film saved the Star Trek franchise. Although arguably that film would have never happened without this film first. So this film does serve some purpose. But anyways, please subscribe if you have not already. Check out all of my Star Trek content, including the Voyager least favorite episode video that I released last week, and the Voyager top 20 favorite episode list that I am releasing simultaneously with this video. So check out all of that stuff. Join me in February when Discovery resumes, and I will resume my coverage of that. And I will see you soon, everyone. Goodbye.